Donald Trump tried to send migrants from Myanmar, Laos, and Vietnam to South Sudan against their will. A federal judge stopped him, and now Donald Trump is on the attack. Quote, the judges are absolutely out of control. They're hurting our country, and they know nothing about our particular situations or what they're doing, and this must change immediately. Hopefully, the Supreme Court of the United States will put an end to the quagmire that has been caused by the radical left. Joining us now, managing editor once again at The Bulwark and MSNBC contributor Sam Stein. Susan Glasser is still with us. All right, Sam, sending these migrants to a third country against their will, it's never been attempted before, but Donald Trump is trying to justify this by claiming that these migrants are criminals, they're the worst of the worst, but we, again, haven't seen evidence of this. If they are the worst of the worst, why are we not seeing that evidence? Why would they not want to put that out there?
That's a great question. In this case, I think two things are happening. One is they did this already, obviously, with El Salvador, and there's been ample reporting that shows that they sent people who were actually innocent or not guilty of a crime, people who they were not supposed to send to El Salvador. And it's obviously created the quagmire that Donald Trump is complaining about right now. And I think in this case, what they've done is something a little bit more cynical, which is they've taken some fairly, clear-cut cases where there are deportation orders, and they basically sent them to Sudan against the court order in order to create a political predicate that they can then use to hammer against the judges. But in the end, it's the same issue. And this is a really, it's funny that Trump blames this quagmire on the judges because it's a quagmire of his own creation. He is defying judicial orders. He is not obeying orders that he observed minimum due process and habeas corpus rights that the Supreme Court has already put in place. And he's trying to test the boundaries of what the legal system will allow. And so for him to blame it on anyone but himself is erroneous, frankly.
I listened to Susan, J.D. Vance talking to Russ Douthat, his long interview at the New York Times, and they talked a lot about immigration. And Vance says that this is an administration that inherited a historic influx of migrants from the Biden administration, which is true. The crossings were higher than they'd ever been, at least in modern times. And that it's just not possible for them to go down the regular routes of order to get these migrants out of the country, and that they ran on mass deportations. They held up the sign at the RNC, everybody cheered. They ran on this, so they believe they have a mandate, he argues, from the American public to make their best efforts to get as many migrants out of the country, undocumented immigrants, as possible.
Yeah, Yale Law School is weeping right now with that argument, Katie. J.D. Vance knows much better than you or I do that that is complete bunk, to be honest. That, in this country, we have a rule of law, and it doesn't have a little asterisk that says, except if you got a really big, historic, absolutely ginormous mandate, and then you don't have to follow the law. So let's dispense with that, because I think that Sam's point is the relevant point here. The administration is following a very clear-cut and purposeful strategy of setting up a series of legal tests by pushing the boundaries of what is possible and waging a number of court fights in which they are holding their options open to flout the judge's ruling if they do not believe that they have the means or the will or the political need to follow through on it. And I think that's why this is such a risky situation for those of us who are following with great anxiety, essentially, the Trump administration's attack on the legal foundations of this country. I think that the attack, we know where it's being mounted, and it's right here in terms of deporting immigrants to this country, to third countries, without any process, without any transparency, and without regard for what the law says.
There's also an interesting racial component to this, Sam, and there's always been a racial component to this. You can go back to Donald Trump making his first announcement for president in 2015, talking about Mexicans coming over the border and the way he described them. And then there was the announcement of a Muslim ban, talking about S-hole countries and only wanting immigration from Norwegian countries. There's a racial element to this, and that Donald Trump has capitalized, and that's what we're seeing again with the deportation flights to third countries, while at the same time, and stopping the refugee program, while at the same time allowing in 49 white Afrikaners. That racial element it has worked for him.
Sure. Yeah, and no doubt. It used to be that you would do this stuff as a dog whistle, but this is a bullhorn. They're not like hiding the ball, right? The campaign, it was centered around Haitian migrants eating dogs, allegedly. Of course, that never actually was proved. It never became a thing. And they just moved on from it. But, you know, in terms of the Afrikaners that they've sent here, I mean, we had a story up a couple of weeks ago on the Bulwark that just showed the hypocrisy here, which is they've gone around, obviously, on these college campuses, and they're sort of policing the visa system and saying, look, if you're publishing op-eds that are, you know, sympathetic to Hamas or critical of Israel, you don't have a right to be here. We don't want people in our country on visas, on student visas, who are espousing views that are antithetical to what we think is in U.S. national interest. Well, it turns out that one of the 49 Afrikaners that they let in had a fairly extensive social media history where it was blatant anti-Semitism. And obviously that didn't matter to the administration because they let him in very specialized, unique circumstances. And so I do think there is an obvious racial component here. I do think there is hypocrisy when you say, well, these Afrikaners are fleeing some sort of white genocide, when they were kicking out people who served our troops in Afghanistan as translators, saying, well, there's nothing wrong with sending them back to Afghanistan now.